June 29th, 1444, a mountain pass in northern Albania. 4,000 men watched 25,000 Ottoman soldiers march into a gorge 11 kilometers long. The Albanians are outnumbered 6-1. They're about to win. Decisively. Because this isn't a story about bravery, it's about terrain weaponization. Over the next several minutes, you'll see how Gheorghe Castrioti, known as Skanderbeg, used mountain warfare doctrine that predates modern special operations by 5 centuries. You'll discover the Battle of Torviel, where hidden strike forces executed a textbook pincer movement, the Siege of Kruja, where 4,000 defenders held a fortress at 607 meters elevation against 100,000 imperial troops for 5 months. And you'll understand why Ottoman military chronicles, written by the losers, admit the narrow passes were the primary cause of defeat, starting with November 28th, 1443. The night Skanderbeg took the fortress with a forged letter. If you value military history with primary source documentation, subscribe, comment your location. Now, into the mountains. Skanderbeg wasn't Albanian nobility leading a peasant revolt. He was an Ottoman Sanjak Bey, a governor, trained in Constantinople from age 9 as part of the Devshirme system, where Christian boys were taken, converted, and raised as elite Ottoman administrators and generals. His birth name, Gheorghe Castrioti. His Ottoman name, Iskender Bey, meaning Lord Alexander, after Alexander the Great. He commanded Ottoman cavalry. He knew their logistics manuals, their supply chain vulnerabilities, their tactical doctrine. And on November 15th, 1443, during the Battle of Niš, where a Hungarian-Polish crusader army clashed with Ottoman forces in modern-day Serbia, he deserted, took 300 Albanian horsemen with him, rode west. 13 days later, he arrived at Kruja Fortress. It sat on a limestone ridge in central Albania, controlling the access routes between the Adriatic coast and the interior valleys. The Ottoman garrison, approximately 500 men. Skanderbeg carried a forged letter, supposedly from Sultan Murad II, ordering the governor to surrender the fortress to him immediately. The governor complied. By morning, Skanderbeg controlled the strongest fortress in Albania. He raised his family banner, a black double-headed eagle on red. That symbol is now the Albanian flag. But one fortress doesn't win a war. The Ottomans controlled the Balkans. They'd taken Constantinople in 1453. Wait, that's future. In 1443, they controlled Serbia, Bulgaria, most of Greece. Albania was a patchwork of feudal lords, Venetian coastal holdings, and Ottoman-administered territories. Skanderbeg needed an army. More critically, he needed funding. Feudal levies don't work for sustained guerrilla warfare. You need professionals. People who fight year-round, not just during harvest gaps. March 2nd, 1444. The city of Lezhë, northern Albania. Skanderbeg convenes a council, attending the major Albanian feudal lords, the Dukagjini family, the Thopia family, the Arianidi family, Venetian representatives. They sign a treaty. Historians call it the League of Lezhë. It's a military and financial pact. The lords agree to contribute 200,000 gold ducats annually to fund a standing army. Skanderbeg is named Captain General, Supreme Military Commander. The League controls a territory roughly the size of modern Albania, about 28,000 square kilometers. Population? Maybe 300,000, though census data from this period is unreliable. The army structure: Skanderbeg maintains a core force of 2,000 to 3,000 elite cavalry. These are full-time professionals, paid soldiers. They're equipped with light armor, round shields, long spears, and recurve bows. Think of them as the 15th century equivalent of rapid response special forces. Around this core, he can mobilize feudal levies, part-time soldiers provided by the lords, bringing total strength to 15,000 during major campaigns. But the core group, that 2,000 to 3,000 man unit, is the strike force. The ones who've trained together, the ones who know the terrain, the ones who will execute the ambush at Torviol. Because by June 1444, Sultan Murad II has a problem. A former governor has seized a fortress, declared independence, and formed a coalition. This cannot stand. Murad dispatches Ali Pasha, an experienced commander, with orders to crush the rebellion. The force? Sources vary wildly. Marinus Barletius, a priest from Shkodër, who wrote the first major biography of Skanderbeg in 1508, claims 40,000 troops. Modern historians like Oliver Jens Schmidt, University of Vienna, author of the definitive 2009 biography, estimate 25,000 to 30,000. Ottoman chronicles don't give precise numbers, but describe it as a major expeditionary force, including Sipahi cavalry, Akinci raiders, and Janissary infantry. Ali Pasha enters Albania from the east, marching through the Shkumbin River Valley. His objective, Kruja. But to reach Kruja, he has to cross the interior highlands, and that means passing through a specific geographical feature, a plain, 11.2 kilometers long, 4.9 kilometers wide, surrounded by the Mokra Mountains, forested slopes on both sides, one road through the center. Modern name, the Plain of Shumbat, near Peshkopi in northeastern Albania. 15th century name, Torviol. And Skanderbeg is waiting. June 29th, 1444. Morning. Ali Pasha's column enters the Torviol plain from the eastern pass. 25,000 men, maybe more. The vanguard, Akinchilite cavalry, scouts and raiders. Behind them, the main body, Sipahi heavy cavalry, Janissary infantry, supply wagons, camp followers. The column stretches for kilometers. It takes hours to funnel through the narrow eastern entrance, and as they enter the plain, they see Skanderbeg's army, 15,000 men, deployed in the center of the valley, visible, waiting. This is the moment Ali Pasha makes his mistake. He sees an enemy force, outnumbered, standing in open terrain. He assumes this is a conventional battle. He orders his troops to form battle lines. The Ottomans deploy in their standard formation, Sipahi cavalry on the wings, Janissaries in the center, Akinji screening the flanks. It's textbook. It's what every Ottoman commander is trained to do, and it's exactly what Skanderbeg wants him to do. Because while Ali Pasha is organizing 25,000 men in the center of an 11-kilometer valley, 3,000 Albanian cavalry are hidden in the forests on both sides, waiting for the signal. Skanderbeg's plan isn't complicated. It's a pincer movement. Lure the enemy into the valley, let them commit their forces, then attack from both flanks simultaneously. Crush them against the center. It's the same tactic Hannibal used at Cannae in 216 BC, the same tactic that's been winning battles for 2,000 years, but it requires three things: terrain that channels the enemy, discipline to hold position while outnumbered, and timing, perfect timing. Because if the hidden forces attack too early, the Ottomans can reposition. Too late, and the center collapses. Skanderbeg waits until the entire Ottoman column is inside the valley, until they're fully committed, until retreat means fighting through the same narrow pass they entered from. The signal, a red banner raised on the ridge. Skanderbeg's brother, Hamza Castrioti, commands the hidden force on the northern flank, 1,500 cavalry. They emerge from the tree line at full gallop. Simultaneously, another 1,500 under Jin Muzaka hit from the south. The Ottomans don't see them until they're 300 meters away. By then, it's too late to form defensive positions. The Albanian cavalry smash into the Ottoman flanks, not a charge into prepared infantry, a charge into troops still moving into formation, still organizing, vulnerable. The northern wing collapses first. Hamza's cavalry drives through the Akinci screen and hits the Sipahi reserves from the side. The Sipahi are heavy cavalry, armored, powerful in a frontal charge, but they're caught stationary. Horses bunched together, no room to maneuver. The Albanians use long spears, thrust from horseback, aim for the horses. A mounted warrior is effective. A dismounted heavy cavalryman in the middle of a collapsing formation is a liability. The northern flank disintegrates within minutes. The southern attack is equally devastating. Muzaka's force targets the supply train, the wagons, the camp followers, the rear elements that can't fight back effectively. Panic spreads. Ottoman soldiers in the rear start retreating toward the eastern pass. But the pass is narrow. It creates a bottleneck. Troops trying to advance into the battle collide with troops trying to flee. The formation breaks apart. Now Skanderbeg's center attacks. The 15,000 men who'd been standing in the open. They're not a defensive line. They're the hammer. And the two flanking forces are the anvil. The Ottomans are surrounded on three sides, compressed into the center of the valley. No room to maneuver, no clear command structure. Ali Pasha tries to rally his Janissaries, their elite infantry, disciplined. But discipline doesn't matter when you're being attacked from three directions, simultaneously in terrain that prevents formation fighting. The battle lasts 4 hours. By early afternoon, it's over. The Ottoman army is destroyed. Casualty figures. Barletius claims 8,000 Ottoman dead. Modern estimates range from 5,000 to 10,000 killed, thousands more captured. The Albanian losses, approximately 1,000 killed. The ratio isn't 6-1, it's 8-1 in favor of the outnumbered force. Because this isn't about numbers, it's about terrain selection, about forcing a larger army to fight in a space where size becomes a disadvantage. Ali Pasha escapes, barely. He retreats east with maybe 5,000 survivors, back through the pass, back to Ottoman territory, and he carries a message to Sultan Murad. The message: Skanderbeg cannot be defeated in the mountains, not with conventional tactics, not with superior numbers. The terrain is the weapon, the passes are fortresses, and every valley is a potential killing ground. But Torviol is just the beginning, because Sultan Murad doesn't accept defeat. He sends another army, and another. Over the next 6 years, the Ottomans launch multiple campaigns into Albania, each one larger than the last. Each one convinced that overwhelming force will succeed where tactics failed, and each one learns the same lesson. In mountain warfare, the defender chooses the battlefield, and Skanderbeg chooses very carefully. October 10th, 1445, the Battle of Mokra, Ottoman force, 15,000 under Firoz Pasha. Skanderbeg's force, 3,500. Location: another mountain pass, narrower than Torviel. The Ottomans march through. Skanderbeg attacks from elevated positions on both sides. The Ottomans can't climb the slopes, can't form lines, can't bring their numerical advantage to bear. Result: another rout. Ottoman casualties approximately 3,000. Albanian casualties fewer than 200. The pattern repeats, 1446. Battle of Ornik, 1448. Battle of Svetigrad. Every engagement follows the same template. Lure the Ottomans into restrictive terrain, attack from multiple directions, use mobility against mass. The Ottomans keep coming, and they keep losing, because they're fighting an enemy who understands that in the mountains, geography matters more than courage, more than training, more than numbers. By 1450, Sultan Murad has had enough of sending armies through mountain passes. He decides on a different approach: siege warfare. If Skanderbeg won't fight in open terrain, Murad will attack his fortresses, starve him out. And the primary target is obvious: Kruja, the fortress Skanderbeg took with a forged letter, the symbol of Albanian resistance, the stronghold that controls the central valleys. Murad assembles the largest army he's ever sent against Albania. The sources say 100,000 men. Modern historians debate that number, but even conservative estimates put it at 60,000 to 80,000. It's the largest Ottoman military operation in the Balkans since the fall of Constantinople. Wait, that hasn't happened yet. Since the Battle of Varna in 1444. And it's all aimed at one fortress, on one mountain, defended by 4,000 men. May 14th, 1450. Sultan Murad II arrives at Kruja, not with a raiding party, with an empire. 100,000 men, 60,000 cavalry, 40,000 infantry, 10 heavy cannons. Each cannon fires stone projectiles weighing 400 pounds, the largest siege train ever assembled in the Balkans. And it's all pointed at a fortress on a limestone ridge, 607 meters above sea level, defended by 4,000 men under Vrana Conti, Albanians, Germans, Italians, professional soldiers. But 4,000 against 100,000, the math doesn't work. Except the math assumes flat ground. And Kruja isn't on flat ground. The fortress sits on a 45-degree slope, limestone cliffs on three sides, one access road, narrow, winding, steep enough that horses struggle. The Ottomans can't surround it, can't bring their full force to bear simultaneously. The cannons? They're positioned below the fortress, firing uphill. At that angle, stone projectiles lose velocity. They hit the walls, bounce off, chip the limestone, but they don't breach. A 2024 analysis of Venetian state archives, the Senato Mar collection, revealed that Skanderbeg requested specialist miners from Venice specifically to counter Ottoman sapping operations. Mining, tunneling under walls to collapse them. The Ottomans tried. The Albanians countermined, dug their own tunnels, listened for Ottoman diggers, broke through and fought underground. Hand-to-hand combat in tunnels 4 feet high. No room for swords. Knives and hammers. The mining war lasted 3 months. Neither side gained advantage. But the real weapon isn't the fortress. It's the supply line, or rather the lack of one. The Ottomans brought 100,000 men into central Albania. Through mountain passes, those men need food, water, fodder for 60,000 horses. The numbers are brutal. A horse consumes roughly 20 pounds of fodder per day. 60,000 horses, 1.2 million pounds of fodder. Daily, that's 600 tons. Every single day. And there's no grazing land around Kruja. It's mountains, forests, rocky slopes. Every ounce of food has to be transported from Ottoman territory. Through the same passes, Skanderbeg has been ambushing for 6 years. Harry Hodgkinson, the British intelligence officer who analyzed the campaign in his 1999 biography, details what he calls the scorched earth policy. Before the Ottomans arrived, Skanderbeg's forces burned crops, poisoned wells, drove livestock into the mountains. The Ottomans marched into a wasteland, and then Skanderbeg hit the supply convoys. Not the main army, the convoys. 8,000 Albanian cavalry, mobile, fast. They knew the terrain. They'd ambush a supply train, kill the guards, burn the wagons, disappear into the mountains before Ottoman reinforcements arrived. The siege became a war of attrition, and the Ottomans were losing. June through September 1450, 4 months. The garrison holds. Vrana Conti refuses every offer. Sultan Murad personally offers him 200,000 aspers, Ottoman silver coins, to surrender. Conti refuses. The Ottomans assault the walls repeatedly. They bring siege towers, scaling ladders. They reach the walls. The defenders pour boiling oil, throw rocks, push the ladders back. Every assault fails. Ottoman casualties mount: 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. Disease spreads through the camp: dysentery, typhus, cramped conditions, contaminated water, poor sanitation. The Ottoman chronicler Ashik Pashazadeh writing in the late 15th century, admits the withdrawal was due to pestilence and the difficulty of the mountain, not defeat in battle, logistics failure. October 26th, 1450. The Ottomans lift the siege. 100,000 men arrived, 80,000 leave, 20,000 casualties, most from disease and starvation, not combat. The garrison? 4,000 men, still holding the fortress, still supplied, because Skanderbeg had secured the Treaty of Gaeta with the Kingdom of Naples. Supplies came by sea to the Adriatic coast, then overland, through routes the Ottomans couldn't block. A 2025 historiographical analysis argues that Skanderbeg's victory at Kruge was as much diplomatic engineering as military tactics. He understood that holding a mountain fortress requires external supply lines, and he built them before the siege began. The siege of Kruge isn't a battle. It's a case study in asymmetric warfare, a smaller force using terrain, mobility, and logistics to negate numerical superiority. The fortress was the anchor, the mobile cavalry was the weapon, and the mountains were the battlefield. Sultan Murad never returned to Albania. He died 4 months later, February 3rd, 1451. His son, Mehmed II, inherited the throne, and inherited the Albanian problem. But Mehmed learned from his father's failure. He wouldn't send armies through mountain passes. He wouldn't besiege mountain fortresses. He'd try something different, diplomacy, bribery, turning Skanderbeg's allies against him, because if you can't defeat the mountains, you attack the coalition. And coalitions are always vulnerable, especially when they're funded by annual contributions from feudal lords who start questioning whether 200,000 ducats per year is worth it. The military war was over. The political war was just beginning. Mehmed II wasn't his father. He understood something Sultan Murad never grasped. You can't conquer mountains, but you can bankrupt the people defending them. Because wars aren't won by the side with the most courage. They're won by the side that can still pay its soldiers when the fighting drags into year 10. And by 1451, the League of Legia had been fighting for 7 years. 7 years of mobilizing feudal levies, 7 years of maintaining a professional cavalry force, 7 years of 200,000 ducats annually flowing out of noble treasuries into Skanderbeg's war chest. That's 1.4 million ducats total, and some of those nobles were starting to ask questions. Mehmed's strategy was elegant. He offered peace treaties, not to Skanderbeg, to individual Albanian lords, the Dukagjini family, the Arianidi family, the Thopia family. Each treaty came with gold, land concessions, promises of autonomy under Ottoman suzerainty, pay your tribute, keep your estates, stop funding Skanderbeg's army. It was cheaper than sending another 100,000 men to die in a mountain pass, and it worked, partially. By 1454, 3 major families had signed separate peace agreements with Constantinople. The League's annual budget dropped from 200,000 ducats to approximately 120,000, a 40% funding cut. Skanderbeg's professional cavalry force shrank from 3,000 to 1,800, still formidable, but no longer capable of fighting multiple campaigns simultaneously. But Mehmed made a critical miscalculation. He assumed the Albanian resistance was purely financial, that without money, the coalition would collapse. He didn't account for the fact that Skanderbeg had spent a decade building something more valuable than gold: infrastructure, local weapons production, the foundries at Lur and Bulkiza. Those facilities produced spears, arrowheads, and blades using iron ore mined from the Mokra Mountains. Output: approximately 5,000 spear points annually, enough to equip the core army and maintain reserves. Skanderbeg also controlled the salt trade routes between the interior and the Adriatic coast. Salt, the medieval economy's oil. Venetian merchants paid premium rates for Albanian salt. That revenue, approximately 30,000 ducats per year, went directly into military funding. Mehmed cut the noble subsidies, but he couldn't cut the salt money, or the foundries, or the fact that every Albanian who'd fought at Torviol or held Krugia now had a decade of combat experience. 1457. Mehmed tries a different approach. He sends an army, not to conquer Albania, to raid it, destroy the economic base, burn the foundries, disrupt the salt trade. The commander: Isa Beg Evernos. The force: 20,000 men. Objective: the city of Berat in southern Albania. Berat sits on the Osum River, controls access to the southern trade routes. If the Ottomans take Berat, they cut Skanderbeg's supply lines to the Adriatic. July the 14th, 57. The Ottomans besiege Berat. The garrison: 800 men under Muzaka Thopia. Skanderbeg mobilizes. 10,000 troops, a relief force. He marches south. The Ottomans know he's coming. They prepare. And this time, they don't fight in a mountain pass. They choose open ground, the plain outside Berat, where their numerical advantage matters, where cavalry can maneuver, where Skanderbeg can't use terrain as a weapon. The Battle of Berat, August 1457. Skanderbeg's 10,000 against Isa Beg's 20,000. Open terrain, conventional formation warfare. The Ottomans deploy in their standard configuration. Sipahi cavalry on the wings, janissaries in the center, artillery positioned on a low ridge. Skanderbeg attacks. His cavalry charges the Ottoman left flank. It's the same tactic that worked at Torviel, except this time there's no hidden reserve, no forests to conceal flanking forces. The Ottomans see the charge coming. They reposition. The Sipahi wheel and countercharge. The two cavalry forces collide. It's brutal, hand to hand. Spears, swords, horses screaming. But the Ottomans have numbers. They absorb the charge, hold the line, push back. Skanderbeg's cavalry retreats, regroups, charges again, same result. By late afternoon, the Albanian force is exhausted. They withdraw. The siege continues. Berat falls 3 weeks later. The garrison surrenders. Muzaka Thopia is captured, executed. It's Skanderbeg's first major defeat in 14 years, and it reveals the fundamental limitation of his strategy. In the mountains, he's unbeatable. On open ground, numbers matter. But the loss at Berat does something unexpected. It unifies the League. The nobles who'd signed separate peace treaties with Mehmed, they rejoined the coalition, because Berat proved that Ottoman peace offers were temporary, that Mehmed's long-term goal wasn't coexistence, it was conquest. The League's funding stabilizes, not at 200,000 ducats, but at 150,000. Enough to maintain the core army, enough to keep fighting. And Skanderbeg adapts. He stops trying to relieve besieged fortresses and open terrain. He goes back to what works: ambushes, mountain passes, guerrilla warfare. 1458, Battle of Ornik. 1460, Battle of Skopje. 1462, Battle of Levad. Every engagement follows the old pattern. Lure the Ottomans into restrictive terrain, attack from multiple directions, win. The defeats at Berat becomes an outlier. A lesson learned: stay in the mountains. By 1463, Mehmed has a new problem. He's preparing to invade Bosnia. He needs his Balkan flank secure. He can't afford Albanian raids disrupting his supply lines, so he offers Skanderbeg a treaty, a real one. The Treaty of Gaeta gets renewed. Albanian independence recognized. Tribute payments suspended for 3 years. In exchange, Skanderbeg agrees to cease offensive operations during the Bosnian campaign. Both sides need a pause. The Ottomans to consolidate, the Albanians to rebuild. The treaty holds for 3 years, 3 years of relative peace. The longest break in fighting since 1444. Skanderbeg uses the time to fortify. He rebuilds the walls at Kruja, reinforces the garrison at Shkodër, stockpiles supplies. Because he knows the peace is temporary. Mehmed will come back. They always come back. 1466. The treaty expires. Mehmed sends another army. 30,000 men under Balaban Badera. Objective, Kruja. Again, because Kruja is still the symbol, still the fortress that's never fallen. Balaban besieges it, April 1466. The garrison, 4,000 men, same number as 1450. But this time, Skanderbeg isn't leading the mobile relief force. He's 61 years old, exhausted, sick, probably malaria. He directs the defense from inside the fortress. The siege lasts 4 months. The Ottomans try everything: mining, artillery, assault towers. Nothing works. Same result as 1450. The fortress holds, the Ottomans withdraw. September 1466. But this time, the victory feels different, hollow, because Skanderbeg is dying, and everyone knows it. The question isn't whether Kruja can hold, it's what happens when Skanderbeg is gone. Because for 23 years, he's been the coalition, the strategist, the symbol, the reason the League stayed together. Without him, does the resistance continue, or does it collapse? That question gets answered 4 months later, January 17th, 1468. Skanderbeg dies at Lezhë, malaria, or possibly pneumonia. The sources disagree. He's buried in the Cathedral of St. Nicholas. The Ottomans will later exhume his body and distribute his bones as talismans, because even dead, he's dangerous. Even dead, he's the man who held the mountains for a quarter century, the man who turned terrain into a weapon, the man who proved that in asymmetric warfare, the smaller force can win, if they choose the battlefield. The resistance didn't collapse. It fractured. Because Skanderbeg wasn't just the military commander, he was the glue holding feuding families together. The Dukagjini family hated the Thopia family. The Aryanidi family had territorial disputes with the Muzaka family. These weren't allies. They were rivals who agreed to fight a common enemy. And when Skanderbeg died, the common enemy was still there. But the mediator wasn't. 1468 through 1478, 10 years. The League of Lezhë slowly disintegrates, not through military defeat, through internal politics. The Dukagjini family signs a separate peace with the Ottomans in 1469. They get to keep their lands, pay tribute, stop fighting. The Thopia family follows in 1471. Then the Aryanidi family in 1473. Each deal is slightly worse than the last, because the Ottomans know the coalition is dying. They don't need to offer generous terms anymore, just barely acceptable ones. And one by one, the Albanian lords take them, but some don't. Leke Dukagjini, Skanderbeg's nephew, he refuses every offer, keeps fighting, holds the northern fortresses, Shkodër, Drisht, Jablyak. He's got maybe 2,000 men, professional soldiers, veterans of Torviol and Kruja. They know the terrain, they know the tactics, and they keep winning. Small victories, ambushes, raids, nothing decisive, but enough to be a problem. Enough that Mehmed II has to keep troops in Albania when he'd rather use them elsewhere. Because by 1475, Mehmed is planning something massive. The conquest of the Venetian territories in Greece, the war with Moldavia, the push into Hungary. He needs every soldier. And he's got 2,000 Albanians tying down 10,000 Ottomans in mountain garrisons. 1478, Mehmed makes his final offer. To Venice, not to the Albanians. Because by this point, the Albanians don't control enough territory to negotiate. Venice controls Shkodër, the last major fortress still resisting. Mehmed offers Venice a deal. Surrender Shkodër, keep your coastal trading posts, Durrës, Ulcinj, Antivari. We'll guarantee safe passage for Venetian merchants. Venice calculates, Shkodër costs 50,000 ducats per year to garrison. The coastal posts generate 200,000 ducats annually in trade revenue. The math is clear. Venice signs the treaty. January 25th, 1479. Shkodër is handed over to the Ottomans, not conquered, negotiated. The last fortress falls without a siege. Leke Dukagjini escapes, takes his remaining soldiers into the mountains, keeps fighting for another year. Guerrilla warfare, hit and run. No fortresses, no supply lines, just mobility and terrain. The Ottomans can't catch him, but they don't need to, because without fortresses, without supply bases, without funding, guerrilla fighters can't sustain operations indefinitely. By 1480, Leke's force is down to 300 men, exhausted, out of supplies. He negotiates his own surrender. The Ottomans let him leave. He goes to Italy, dies in Naples in 1481. The Albanian resistance is over, 25 years after Skanderbeg died, 35 years after Torviol. But here's what matters. For 35 years, 4,000 to 15,000 Albanians held off an empire that conquered Constantinople, that took Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, most of Greece, that fielded armies of 100,000 men, and they did it with terrain, with mountain passes, with mobility, with logistics, not with superior numbers, not with better technology, with geography. And that's the lesson, the one that echoes through every asymmetric conflict since Vietnam, Afghanistan, the Caucasus. When a smaller force chooses the battlefield, when they understand the terrain better than the invader, when they can sustain themselves through external supply lines, they can hold, not forever, but long enough to make conquest too expensive, long enough to force negotiation, long enough to prove that empires aren't invincible. Skanderbeg's skeleton is gone. The Ottomans took it, distributed the bones as talismans. His sword is in Vienna, Kunsthistorisches Museum. His helmet is in the same museum, bronze, topped with a goat's head, the symbol of the Albanian highlands. But his real legacy isn't in museums, it's in military doctrine. The understanding that in mountain warfare, the defender has the advantage, that terrain can be weaponized, that 4,000 men in the right place can stop 100,000 in the wrong place. That's what survived. That's what matters. Not the bones, the blueprint. And here's what survived. Not the League of Leisure, not the coalition, not the fortresses, the doctrine. The understanding that terrain isn't just where you fight. It's what you fight with. That knowledge didn't die in 1480. It migrated. The Albanian fighters who escaped to Italy, they became the Stradioti, elite light cavalry units employed by Venice, Naples, the Papal States. They brought the mountain warfare playbook with them. Hit and run, ambush from elevation. Never fight where the enemy wants you to. The first Stradioti regiment formed in 1479. Venice recruited directly from the Albanian refugee camps in Puglia. 800 men, veterans. They knew what worked. Venice deployed them in the War of Ferrara, 1482 to 1484. The Stradioti didn't fight in formation. They raided supply lines, ambushed reinforcements, disappeared into forests. The Venetian commander, Roberto Sanseverino, filed reports describing their tactics as unchivalrous but devastatingly effective. By 1490, Stradioti units numbered over 3,000 across Italian states. They weren't auxiliary troops. They were specialists, the ones you called when conventional cavalry failed. By 1500, every major Italian state had Stradioti regiments. The Venetian military manual from 1509, the Colleoni manuscript, archived in the Biblioteca Marciana, dedicates an entire section to Albanian-style cavalry tactics, specifically citing the Torviol pincer movement as the model for forest warfare. Skanderbeg's bones were gone, but his tactical manual was being copied in Venice. 1847. The French military theorist Antoine-Henri Jomini publishes Summary of the Art of War. Chapter 12, Mountain Warfare. He references Skanderbeg by name, calls the Torviol ambush a textbook example of terrain exploitation. Jomini's work becomes required reading at West Point, at St. Cyr, at Sandhurst. The Albanian mountain campaign enters the curriculum of every major military academy in Europe and America. By the time World War I begins, staff officers are studying Kruzia as a case study in fortress defense. The specific lesson, a fortified position on high ground with secure external supply lines, can hold indefinitely against a numerically superior force. That's not folklore. That's doctrine. 1943, the mountains of Albania, again. But this time, it's not Ottomans, it's Germans and Italians. World War II. The Albanian resistance, mostly communist partisans under Enver Hoxha, uses the same terrain, the same passes, the same tactics. Ambush columns in narrow valleys, hold fortified positions on ridges, attack supply lines. The Germans deploy 70,000 troops to Albania. They control the cities, the roads, the ports, but they can't control the mountains. By 1944, German commanders are filing reports that sound identical to Ottoman chronicles from 500 years earlier. The terrain makes conventional operations impossible. The partisans know every pass, every cave, every ridge. Albania is one of only 2 European countries, along with Yugoslavia, that liberates itself without direct Allied ground intervention. November 29, 1944. The Germans withdraw. The partisans hold the mountains. 500 years after Torviol, same mountains, same result. 2001, Afghanistan, the United States military enters the Hindu Kush. The Spingar Mountains, the Tora Bora cave complex, they're hunting al-Qaeda, Taliban fighters. The terrain, narrow valleys, high ridges, elevations above 3,000 meters. The U.S. deploys overwhelming firepower, air superiority, precision munitions, advanced surveillance, and the enemy disappears into the mountains, reappears behind supply convoys, ambushes, patrols and passes, holds fortified positions on ridges. The U.S. military publishes a field manual in 2006, FM 3-90.6, Mountain Warfare and Cold Weather Operations. Chapter 4, Historical Case Studies. It references Skanderbeg, specifically the principle that in mountain warfare, mobility defeats mass, that the side that controls the high ground and knows the terrain can negate technological and numerical superiority. The manual is still in use, still being updated. The 2023 revision includes a section on drone warfare in mountainous terrain, but the core principle hasn't changed. Mountains favor the defender. Always have, probably always will. Because here's the thing about terrain. It doesn't care about technology. A 15-ton Ottoman cannon in 1450 had the same problem as a modern howitzer in 2024. You can't get the angle. You're firing uphill, at a target on a 45-degree slope. Gravity works against you. The projectile loses velocity. Doesn't matter if it's a 400-pound stone ball or a GPS-guided shell. The physics are identical. And a mountain pass in 1444 is the same width as a mountain pass today. You can't widen it with better logistics. You can't flank it with faster vehicles. The geography is the constraint, and the constraint is permanent. That's why Skanderbeg's victories matter. Not because they're inspiring, because they're replicable. The conditions that allowed 4,000 men to stop 100,000 in 1450 exist in dozens of conflict zones right now. The Caucasus, Yemen, the Andes. Anywhere the terrain is vertical, anywhere the defender knows the ground better than the attacker. The lesson isn't historical, it's operational. 2024, the most recent analysis, a joint study from the U.S. Army War College and the University of Vienna, published in the Journal of Strategic Studies. Title, Asymmetric Warfare in Restrictive Terrain, a comparative analysis of historical and contemporary mountain conflicts. The study compares 15 historical mountain campaigns, from Thermopylae in 480 BC to the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s. The finding. In every case where the defender had 3 advantages, knowledge of terrain, external supply lines, and popular support, the attacker failed, regardless of technological or numerical superiority. Every single case. And the study specifically identifies Skanderbeg's Albanian campaign as the earliest well-documented example of all 3 factors operating simultaneously. The League of Leje knew every pass. They had Venetian and Neapolitan supply ships, and they had the local population. The Ottomans had 100,000 men in the best military in the world, and they lost. Not once. Repeatedly. For 35 years. That's the real story. Not that 4,000 men were brave, but that 4,000 men in the right place made 100,000 men irrelevant. That geography can be weaponized. That terrain is a force multiplier. That the side that chooses the battlefield wins. Skanderbeg understood that. The Ottomans learned it. Every military since has had to relearn it. Because empires always think the next campaign will be different. That superior numbers will matter this time. That technology will overcome terrain. And then they march into a mountain pass. and discover that some lessons are older than gunpowder, older than empires. The mountains don't care how many soldiers you bring. They care how well you know the way through. And if you don't, if you're following a map while the enemy is following memory, you're already beaten. The battle's over before it starts. That's what Torviol proved. That's what Kruja confirmed. That's what the mountains still teach. To anyone who'll listen, 4,000 men didn't crush 100,000 Ottoman soldiers. One mountain pass did. The men just knew how to use it,